Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Every Quentin Tarantino movie, to me, always feels sort of like a party, especially if you see them with an audience. There's always laughing, there's always gasping, there's always a reaction. I guess if you see it with a good audience, and it feels like a good time. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood maybe is the best party he's ever thrown in terms of entertainment and fun, kind of an enjoyableness. It's probably the most easy to go down of any of his movies. I like that about it. I don't know if his films are as different for me as they used to feel. I have a weird relationship with his material in that when I first got into movies, he was such a big presence. I would try to see all the movies that had an influence on his film, and like Kill Bill, I think I was watching movies for like 2 years, something like that. I've kind of come to this point with him where maybe I haven't seen one or two or something like that, especially starting with Django. I knew the films of Sergio Corbucci before, so it wasn't as surprising and as different for me, and I understood what he was doing with that kind of filmography. In this, it's like I know the late 60s, not incredibly, I'm not an expert, but I reread and researched that period so many times, I sort of knew the layout. Within that world, he very much gets it. He gets the importance of that time period, probably more of it like the TV landscape, everything that was going on in LA and Hollywood in general, in terms of all the various different entertainment industries, what was changing with the hippies, and where the Manson murders is a real, considered at least, turning point in that. I think the ending is fairly obvious, and I guessed it months out because, and I don't think it's a spoiler, but I don't know why you're watching this if you don't want this spoiled. So if you don't, maybe stop watching. And I'm actually not going to say what it is, but I think you'll figure it out after I say this. Is like, this is in the tradition of Inglourious Bastards and Django Unchained, but I think the big difference in this and those is that, you're not cinematically curing World War II or slavery. Not that he really successfully did that, although I haven't really seen very many good World War II movies, or as many World War II movies, which I'm a little more thankful for after Inglourious Bastards, because how could you after you killed Hitler? And I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood kind of doesn't look at it that way. It sort of does, but it plays it more. What I find interesting, and probably shows how Tarantino views what's cool about every era, and wouldn't it be cool if they played around more. I almost feel like he looks at eras and wonders why this director and that actor didn't get together, and how they would have been perfect if they ever had, and they could have made this movie, and they would have had this soundtrack and had this like imaginative dream scenario. And that's what sort of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood really is, to such a crazy fun level. It's like a film dork inventing his own late 60s Hollywood era. And that's sort of what all cinephiles do. It's a period that's like completely overcovered, frankly. It's like the 60s and 70s. It's an awesome period. I totally get it, by the way. Like, I've gotten obsessed with that period, and it's obnoxious to everyone else because they're like, yeah, we all go through it. Just get through it so we can talk about the 30s or something. And I think in a lot of ways, Tarantino gets getting into that, yeah, it might be lame, but if I'm going to be lame, I'm going to be the lamest person around and do it in maybe the coolest way imaginable. He really acknowledges the period in terms of what it really was, not like over kind of emphasizing or over stylizing or over sympathizing with the hippies, although the hippies in this are like the Manson family, so I guess you can't really sympathize with them. But the idea of this film is really sympathizing more with, the older actors. The actors in this, Rick Dalton, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and Brad Pitt's character as well, are kind of on the other end of Hollywood. Are the Westerns going to survive? Can they keep going as everything becomes hippie-ish? Everything's kind of turning, and will they make that turn, or will they have to give this up? And there are major turning points in Hollywood, and there's turning points in any industry, and there's age turning points as well. They're both very aware that it's not working out in their favor, and they're scared of it. But I think this kind of goes into the whole idea of, well, what is it like when this one era is ending while this other era is beginning? I think especially the interesting thing about those main characters, if you think of the 60s in film, you're thinking about Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda and Polanski. You're not thinking about the guy who oh crap, maybe I should give up directing because they just gave this like 2-picture deal to Robert Altman and I don't really even get his movies because I'm a studio director. That's not a sexy kind of cool period. It's interesting you're getting the view of Hollywood is changing and they're not sure what to do, rather than the eye of the 60s of wasn't an amazing fantastical time. And it's kind of like it was an amazing fantastical time, but what there was change and what that did to those actors that were changing with it. While still this film feels very light, this is probably the lightest film I've ever seen from Quentin Tarantino. I actually sort of like that about this movie. I could imagine watching this more times than his last two. I can't, and I really haven't watched Hateful Eight again, and I haven't rewatched Django in a little bit, but this feels like one you could have on a lot. This film spends a lot of time in like kind of the world building and understanding Hollywood, and if you're supposed to be like the biggest character in the film is California or something like that, I guess you could, because it's really just trying to understand 1969 in LA. It's trying to understand that, making sure you get that period before it fully gets into kind of the bigger things. And it's a really kind of, I think, magical movie in that it's probably and maybe one of the most entertaining movies of the entire summer, because it's able to be really funny and really fun, but also like tie it all together. In some ways, I'm like, this is a weird kind of way the end of Quentin Tarantino's career is, that he's just like, hey, what if we cinematically repair history that I didn't think was fair or liked or something. But I sort of get on a filmmaking level that like why he would do that. I think there is a certain aspect to like that film is dying, although I did actually see this on 35mm. I know the sexier thing is to do 70mm, but those tickets were sold out and that was like way further for me. And then I found out Alamo Drafthouse is playing a 35mm print, and I have a film strip. You get a film strip, which is kind of cool when you see it in 35. I don't know if everyone gets that or just the 35 people, to be honest. It was just there on my table, so I don't know. I didn't even ask the server, I asked the guy next to me, so I might have stolen something. I'm not sure. I did actually see this on film, and I think a lot of this is about the changing of film, the importance that used to be on film, the importance of entertainment, and the ego associated with that. It a little bit is about filmmaking and the good times you can have with it. The obvious kind of thing to tell about this, because this is a person, all Tarantino really makes big statements about the times or his personality or things he loves, and clearly movies are a big thing for him, but the late 60s in LA are clearly a personal thing to him, and how the Manson family affected him, I think, is a personal thing for him as well. But this film reminds me a lot of The Nice Guys, which was Shane Black dealing with 70s, not 60s LA, and I get that through it, and understanding like there were bigger aspects to this film industry and culturally and what that really represented and things like that. But I also get a sense of Hal Needham in this, in terms of like the fun of it, the looseness of it. When it ended, I was like, that was really, I thought that was like an hour and a half. Like it went by, I was so in it went by so breezily. It was quite remarkable, and it reminded me of Hal Needham's work in Smokey and the Bandit. I know Burt Reynolds was supposed to have the part that Bruce Dern did, but he died, so he could not, which is sad. And also Luke Perry died after filming his short role in this, which is also sad that happened. But Burt Reynolds' thing was not just because he probably thought Burt Reynolds was cool, but also because this did have a Hal Needham vibe to it. And if you're not really into Tarantino, I would actually, believe it or not, although Pulp Fiction's a pretty amazing film, so maybe that is a good place to start. I mean, that's where we all started. But this might be a good one just because it's so light in getting into itself. I don't believe that this is Tarantino's masterpiece, because to me it's like Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown, and then there's like the other ones, which I don't think I've ever seen a film from him that I've ever disliked. I've liked very much all of them. He has a pretty flawless filmography, but this does feel like the only one that I'd say like, oh, this like feels like he made a poppy movie, but he made it kind of like, if you really think about this movie, a washed up action TV actor's perspective on 1969 doesn't sound like something you'd be that into, to be honest. Like, that sounds like, why wouldn't I just hear what Roman Polanski's doing? Being shitty to Sharon Tate, most likely. I find that interesting because it's just like, I never really thought about that during this. I think the Sharon Tate role should have been expanded more. She doesn't get a lot to say. We don't really get to learn her personality as much, and it kind of plays into the idea we've always had of Sharon Tate as kind of more of an image than a person, and I don't think this really gets into the person. I'm not sure why he chose to do that. I don't know if like this needed like a real third character. She kind of is in a way, but it feels like it's more about Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio's character. And I kind of wonder like why have her in it as much as he did. That I question a little bit. I just think this is a really entertaining, awesome, engrossing movie made by a cinephile who loves this period. And I think it's really fun and watchable. I think it does feel a lot more slighter. Like pretty much all of his films, it feels like his kind of more lighter, kind of wistful movie. It feels almost like a midlife crisis thing where he's like, I want to talk about things from when I was a little kid that I always wished I could talk about. And now that he's theoretically saved, World War II and saved slavery, now he's going to save 70s filmmaking, or maybe just saved it for one guy. But it's the one guy that he kind of cares about, which is sort of an interesting way to put it. But, who else would go like, oh, well, let's have Bruce Lee in this, and let's have, this whole thing with a flamethrower, let's have this things with like Kurt Russell's in this. But there were like some details that I'm not exactly sure where they're going with that didn't exactly connect or really go anywhere, but there's still kind of fun little details that you're like, I enjoyed them and I like enjoyed those scenes, but like I don't know if Bruce Lee really needed to be in this movie, but I really like the actor. It was such a precise thing. I started laughing. It's like, my hands are deadly wet. Like that was such a good Bruce Lee. It was fun watching him have so much fun in this period. It felt like he was like, I'm gonna let loose and have fun, and you're going to have as much of a good time as I am making this, or making this world, or digging into this world, or writing this world, just imagining this thing. It felt like as fun to watch as it was to imagine, and you can imagine that world and imagine all the different possibilities, and the possibilities of stories that you didn't even get to read about, that you kind of imagine was going on, that Steve McQueen with the mamas and the papas and things like that. Like you'd like to imagine, oh, they were at a party. I wonder what that party was like. I wonder what they talked about. I wonder what they were interested in. This film goes into that very well. He does it in a way that like this still, this doesn't feel like a poppy fun movie from a past gone era. This feels like one now, and he plays in it and makes it a lot of fun, and he gets probably one of the best Brad Pitt performances we've seen in a long time. DiCaprio's a lot of fun. DiCaprio's not really fun in a lot of movies, but he was fun in this. I did like Margot Robbie, even though she didn't really get to do as much. I feel like she usually has meteor roles, but I thought she was very good as Sharon Tate. I like that she was in a film with so many Pan Am references, so that was neat. I think the dog stuck out to me. I thought the dog was very good. It was fun seeing Al Pacino. All the stuff they did with like the movies and shows within this movie were kind of neat, which they kind of play within those various layers with this film. But it's playing within those layers of understanding like this is what the media landscape was really like. It wasn't like Jimi Hendrix playing at Woodstock all the time. This was actually what it was. And I think he's kind of, nostalgically playing with it, but he's kind of nostalgically playing with it in a way to remind you this is what it was like. Now let's play in this fantasy. He's doing what you truly do in nostalgia, but he's almost like too much of a cinephile and a researcher to kind of just let that go. He understands what's exactly on TV the entire time, and he wants to dig into it and think about what those people's lives were like while they were watching FBI, while they were watching Bonanza and so forth. That's the kind of cool thing about this film, is you're watching someone play around in a world, in a time period they understand maybe too well. And you never really get to see a filmmaker play with a period piece, almost like joyfully, gleefully, and correcting and making it the true fantasy fairy tale it is. And the wistful nature of this, the fun nature of this, is really what makes this film. And it makes it probably Quentin Tarantino's most enjoyable movie. It might not be his best. It's definitely not really that high up there for me, frankly. But I had a really good time. And I think this is almost similar to Toy Story 4 in that I really like both of these movies. I would definitely just start watching them on HBO if they're on or something like that, or whatever streaming service or however we're watching movies. I would totally just put this on while I'm doing other things and love to walk in the room and find a funny bit. These are very watchable, enjoyable movies. They're saying interesting things and playing with them. They're not like the best films from that franchise or directed by him, but in some ways I don't think they're really trying to be that. They're trying to be their own statements, and they're understanding they're apart from either of those things. That's really sort of what I liked about it. It might be his midlife crisis movie because he's sort of dealing with the past and understanding like how joyful and amazing it was, but Quentin Tarantino is good at doing that. So whatever path or trip he's on in this, I fully really enjoyed it. Is it really saying much of anything? I don't think so, but I think what it's really doing is kind of like showing you the fun that could have happened in the 60s if the Manson family hadn't ruined it all. And Tarantino is here to make sure that doesn't happen. So if you have seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.